Hello, I'm Joe and welcome to fxchartworks.com. Today we're doing something a little different to normal. I'm going to try to take you step by step through creating a custom indicator in MetaTrader. Before I start, let me tell you I'm not promoting that this is a great custom indicator. We've chosen this indicator simply because it's easy enough for us to write. It shows a few techniques, and the purpose of the video is a how-to video rather than to demonstrate a particular indicator to you. What you can see on screen is the indicator we're going to create. It's a simple trend indicator showing histograms when there's an uptrend, when there's a downtrend, and with uncertainty we get a gap. This is based very broadly on indicators you may have seen loosely called ribbons or rainbows. They are simply a combination of three moving averages. If I can just add a moving average to the screen, I'll show you. So a simple 34 period moving average, an exponential 34 period moving average, you'll see is following the slow line. If I then add in a 13 period moving average, so that's following the fast line, and these periods of uncertainty, add in a 5 period moving average, just make that a white line, are where the signal, as I'm calling it, moving average, dips between the two moving averages. So all we've done is remove the moving average lines, remove the signal line, and create a histogram for you. Remove those from the screen. So not a lot of calculation in here. It's all about technique of writing the indicator. Now, as you can see, I've already created one. We're going to go from scratch, so you don't have to watch painfully as I type things. I've already got the indicator written. I'm going to be simply cutting and pasting and explaining the code as we go. So let's go to the meta editor. This is the indicator we're copying, trend ribbon. I'm going to new custom indicator, trend ribbon. Now you'll notice I, as a matter of habit, do not fill in parameters at this point. I prefer to get to the code screen and create them. So this is all we need to get the skeleton of the indicator written. On calculate. Right. So what we have here, standard header block, property strict, indicator chart window. So we're going to have the indicator in the same window that we have. The main chart rather than a secondary window. Now, let's go to creating a few things. First, we need to tell MetaTrader how to display how many buffers we need. Buffers being where MetaTrader will store the information that's going to be displayed on screen. So I'm just copying from off screen. So I'm going to have two buffers being initially. These will be the fast and the slow moving average on screen. As you can see back here, I am actually showing the lines, dotted lines. While I'm here, if you've been following carefully, you'll have noted these two moving averages. This is the same value you'll find in a MACD of the same moving averages. It's just that instead of showing in a separate window centered around a zero line, I'm showing them based around the slow moving average line. Yeah. Back here, so two property buffers, and now I need some inputs. These inputs will allow you to specify how you want the calculations done. So you can see my signal MA period 5, fast MA period 13, slow 34. I'm using the MA methods. I'm choosing an exponential moving average for this calculation. Now the way these will appear on screen later, if we go to the indicators, look at the trend ribbon, you'll see these are the same names that I've given to the variables in the code. These are the default values that I set up. When I'm running the indicator, of course, I can change these, but the values that we put into the code are what will appear initially. Cancel that, close. Okay. Now we need a place to store the values of these moving averages so they can be displayed on screen. So I'm going to create two arrays. So these are arrays of double values because the values on a chart are doubles. The fast being my fast moving average and slow being my slow moving average array. That's all I need to define them at this point. A little later in the code we get to showing MetaTrader how to use those. Now one more thing that I like to do, this is just a personal preference. You'll note we've got two indicator buffers. These buffers are numbered from 0. I like to assign values to those. So my fast indicator is going to be in buffer 0 and the slow indicator is going to be in buffer number 1. Now we're going to associate these double buffers with these numbers in the init section. So we're going to get to that right now. Okay, in the init section. First thing, we're setting the style. What I'm saying is that the fast indicator, number 0, is a line, a dotted line. This is the width parameter, so it's just a narrow dotted line. And I'm selecting a color, in this case firebrick. Exactly the same statement here for the slow indicator. The next thing, the buffer. This is where we are associating the values that we're storing for the moving average with the indicator number. So fast indicator has the fast buffer. And the label is simply a name that gets applied. If you were to hover over the line on screen, you would see this name attached, and it's useful if you want to identify the values that are actually showing on screen. And then we've done exactly the same thing for the slow indicator. Set the buffer for the slow indicator to be buffer slow. Alright, I do like to group everything for a particular indicator / buffer in one block. Some people would set all of the index styles first, then all of the index buffers. I just find this a little easier to follow. Now, next thing we're going to do is actually creating the code. Now, on calculate, we'll run when something changes on the chart that means that we need to get a calculation. And typically that's going to mean a market event, a new trade, a price change. There's not really much point in doing the calculations any other time. There are other options available in MetaTrader based on timers. They would be for very specific purposes, because typically calculating this in between market events isn't going to yield any different results. So we're going to today just stay with the on calculate. Now there are a number of things we need to do. First, I'm going to set up the variables that I'll use in here. Now, I already know these variables because, as I said, I've written earlier. What I will normally do when I'm writing code, though, is I'll just begin writing the code, come back and fill these in as I go if I realize there's something I've missed. Now, we need to put in a little check here. Rates total, which is being passed in here, shows us how many bars are available for us to perform calculation. I know that I've set my slow moving average period here as part of the inputs. If I don't have at least as many rates as the slow moving average period, I can't perform the calculation. So we're just going to leave at that point and wait until later when this gets called again and we might have enough rates to calculate. Next, we want to determine how many bars we actually want to perform our calculation on. So limit, my variable that I said earlier, is the number of rates that we have available minus the number that we've already calculated. So MetaTrader will keep track of what we've done previously and won't force us to recalculate everything on the chart unless some event happens that means that they need to be recalculated. So typically this will cut down on the work that your computer's doing as each tick goes by. And here simply if we already have some that have been calculated, we're just making sure that we recalculate the last bars that may have changed as a result of price movement. So we're increasing our limit if we've already done some calculations. Now we'll get into the calculation here. We're going to run this in a loop. Sometimes you'll see this loop written in the opposite way as I've shown here. I will typically prefer to go from the limit -1 up to 0. The bars in MetaTrader are counted such that the current bar is 0 and the bar number increases as the bars get older. So I'm calculating here from left to right. Sometimes it makes sense to calculate from right to left, and some people simply prefer to do this form. But I find that by calculating from left to right, it avoids the possibility that I accidentally look into the future when I'm writing the code. So I'm calculating these are my three moving average variables I created earlier, and I'm calculating each of those using the standard IMA moving average calculation. This calculation will allow you to specify null here, and in that case it will pick up symbol from the chart. I like to be more specific and actually type symbol. This is the same value, it's still coming from the chart, it's just a little bit more explicit as to what I'm using. Also, this moving average calculation will allow you to leave 0 here, and it will pick up the period from the chart. I like to specify that period as well. Here are my three values entered in the inputs. This is the moving average shift. It will simply move the moving average, that number of bars, to one side. I'm not using that today, so we're shifting 0. The method, again, this was part of the inputs. We're using exponential moving average. We're using the closing price, and this tells me, or this tells the calculation, which bar we want the moving average for. Because I'm working on every bar from my limit in the past up to now, this is the bar number that I'm calculating. So I calculate the three moving averages first, and then I'll perform some calculations to determine what I'm going to show on screen. So what I'm saying is, if the signal is greater than the fast moving average and the fast is greater than the slow moving average, so all three moving averages are aligned, trending up, then I'm setting the fast and the slow buffer to the fast and the slow moving averages. Equally, I'm saying if the signal is below the fast moving average and the fast moving average is below the slow moving average, so all moving averages are trending down, then I'm also setting values. Now, it would be possible to combine these into a single statement. You can see that there's no difference between these lines and these. But when we get to adding the histogram later, you'll see there's a slight difference here. I'm at the moment just plotting the two lines on screen. And the one case that's left here is where these three don't align, which would be typically where the signal is between these two or on the opposite side of the slow moving average to the fast moving average. And in that case, we'll do nothing. And finally, this was already inserted by the wizard when we created this. We return rates total. This tells MetaTrader how many of these bars we have used. We've used all of them, so that will come back next time in the previously calculated, so that we don't need to recalculate past bars. This should be all we need to compile and see this on screen. So I'll compile. Trend driven compiled, no errors there. We go back to screen. This is the original indicator. I'm going to remove that now, trend ribbon 1, and replace it with our new trend ribbon 51334 exponential. And you see what we've got here. The fast and the slow moving average at points where the 5-period moving average dips in between them, we simply have a gap in the lines. So these are the bounding lines already done. we don't have the histogram yet, but you can see the outline of where we're going with this. Now the histogram is a little bit unusual in its implementation. In the new MetaTrader releases, there are better ways to do this, but I found them so far to be a little bit inconsistent in the way they operate. So what I'm going to show you today is the older method. It has its own quirks, but at least it's consistent in the way it operates. So we need to make a couple of changes to what we have here. Firstly, in order to show the histogram, and if you remember from the diagram, we showed it in two different colors depending whether we were trending up or down. We're going to need two more buffers to show the histogram. So we'll increase our buffers to 4. We need to have places to store the histogram values. So I'm going to create 2 more buffers which will show my up histogram and my down histogram. I'm going to change the indicator numbers. Now let me just add these here to show you the difference. My fast indicator now has a number 3. My slow indicator still has a number 1, but I've now added up and down indicator numbers for the up and down histograms. You might wonder why I've changed these numbers, so let me remove these initially. This is because when drawing histograms, MetaTrader draws them between the indicator for the histogram, so my up indicator for example is number 0, and the next indicator number. So when we're in an uptrend, we want to draw the histogram above the slow moving average up to the value we specify in the indicator, and when we're in a downtrend, we want to draw the histogram from the fast indicator, which will be down low, up to some other value specified in the down indicator. It's just the way they work, and just remember that the sequence is important. The value that you put into the histogram indicator is the high value, and the value in the next greater indicator number is the bottom of that histogram bar. Alright, so that means these are going to have to change, and again this is a good reason why I use defined numbers in here rather than hard coding the number of the indicator, because now these are simply working. I then have to add the histogram definitions. So first, my up indicator, it's a histogram, a dotted line. I'm making it green. I'm associating the up buffer with the up indicator, and I'm simply saying the empty values when nothing's specified are going to be 0 for this buffer. That will simply mean that no histogram line appears. And next we do the same thing for the down indicator. Style dot, different color, associating the down buffer with the down indicator. Alright, almost there. Now down here you'll remember I said that there was a reason for separating these. That reason is when we're in an uptrend, I'm only going to specify the up buffer. Now remember, the buffer on the histogram stores the high value for the histogram. So because we're in an uptrend, the high value is the fast moving average, and because of the association of indicator numbers, slow moving average, the slow moving average is number 1, the up indicator is 0. So the histogram line will be drawn between the slow indicator and the up indicator. And as you might have guessed, when we're in a downtrend, I'm only going to put a value into the downward buffer. And in this case, the top of the down buffer is at the slow moving average, and the bottom of the down buffer will be specified by the fast moving average. That should be it. Just compile that. Now, normally these will simply reproduce on the screen when you compile, but because I changed the number of buffers, that simply doesn't work. And I have to remove it, replace it on screen. And now we have our up histograms and our down histograms showing trends and the gaps between our periods of uncertainty. So that's all we have to demonstrate on this today. I hope this has been useful to you. I've tried to make this not too basic and not too complex. If you think that there are some basics that I should cover, then please leave a comment, and I'll come back with follow-ups that will cover some of those items. If you'd like me to move on to some other areas, please leave comments. I am planning to do more of these series, getting into expert advisors and showing how we can apply them to things that are non-technical indicators such as price action indicators and price action expert advisors. But largely your comments will tell me where I need to focus the attention on these. Again, hope this was useful. Please subscribe, visit fxchartworks.com, and my name's Joe. Thanks for watching.